Jesse Ridgway's comments about Down syndrome have now drawn a direct response from Kandi Pickard, the president and CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society. And her message shifts the conversation away from outrage and towards something more complicated: what families are told, what they fear, and what they may not know when a prenatal diagnosis changes everything. Ridgway and his wife Ashley had already shared that they made the difficult decision to end a pregnancy after receiving a fetal diagnosis of Trisomy 21, the chromosomal condition also known as Down syndrome. But the line that put the story in a much larger spotlight was his public statement that Down syndrome isn't a blessing. Now Pickard, who is also the mother of a son with Down syndrome, says she strongly disagrees with that view. For verified entertainment updates without the rumors, subscribe to Startline Entertainment. The latest update is not a new medical development in the Ridgway family. It is a new public response from one of the most visible advocacy voices in the Down syndrome community. Pickard told people that a diagnosis can be scary for parents, but she also said families need correct and accurate information before they make decisions. That distinction matters because this story has become more than a personal announcement from a YouTube creator. It has become a public debate about disability, parenthood, reproductive decisions, grief, and the way social media responds when someone shares something deeply private in a very public space. Jesse Ridgway, known online as McJuggernuggets, has spent years building an audience around personal storytelling, videos, and creator-driven content. According to Entertainment Weekly, his YouTube channel has more than 4 million subscribers, which helps explain why a private family update spreads so quickly. When a creator with that kind of reach shares a decision this emotional, the story does not stay inside one Instagram story or one audience. It gets pulled into larger conversations that already existed long before his family was involved. The timeline began publicly when Jesse and Ashley announced in March that they were expecting their first baby. Then, 2 months later, they shared that testing had shown Trisomy 21. According to reports, the couple later posted that they had decided to terminate the pregnancy. Jesse described the decision as extremely painful and said it followed conversations with medical professionals, family, and people close to them. But the public reaction did not focus only on the decision. It also focused on the language Jesse used when he described Down syndrome. In his statement, he said he initially thought they could make it work, but then said he had not fully understood what Down syndrome could involve. He referenced possible health risks, including heart defects, hearing challenges, and developmental issues. Those are real possibilities, but experts and advocates say the range of outcomes can vary widely, from person to person. That is where Kandi Pickard's response becomes important. Pickard did not say that a diagnosis is easy. She did not say every family's situation is the same. Instead, she challenged the broad framing that Down syndrome itself is not a blessing. As a parent, she said she vehemently disagrees with that sentiment. Her argument was not built on denying medical realities. It was built on the idea that medical risk is not the whole life story of a person with Down syndrome. People with Down syndrome can experience health challenges. The CDC describes Down syndrome as a genetic condition caused by an extra copy of chromosome 21, and notes that it can affect brain and body development. The CDC also lists common health concerns, including congenital heart defects, hearing loss, and obstructive sleep apnea. But the same CDC page also says people diagnosed with Down syndrome can lead healthy lives with supportive care. That is the tension at the center of this story. The diagnosis can come with serious medical considerations, but it does not tell the full future of a child, a family, or a person's quality of life. Pickard also pointed to research on families and people living with Down syndrome. One study of people with Down syndrome found that the overwhelming majority of respondents were happy with their lives and liked who they were. Another study of parents found that nearly all respondents said they loved their son or daughter with Down syndrome, and most said they were proud of them. Those studies do not erase the hard parts. They do, however, complicate any public statement that reduces Down syndrome only to suffering or burden. That nuance is also what Dr. Ebony January, an OBGYN quoted by People, emphasized. She said that a Down syndrome diagnosis can be emotionally devastating for some families, but that it should not be reduced to a headline, a comment section, or a moral debate. She also stressed the importance of compassion in every direction. That may be the most difficult part of this story, because the public conversation has often moved faster than the facts, and much faster than empathy. After Jesse and Ashley shared their decision, Jesse said the couple received intense backlash, including death threats. Entertainment Weekly reported that he said they had received a tremendous amount of threats and messages calling them murderers. People also reported that Jesse condemned what he described as hate and vitriol, saying he had never seen that level of hostility toward two people grieving and making what he called an impossible decision. That part of the story matters too. Disagreeing with a public figure's comments is one thing. Threatening a family is another. A serious conversation about disability, medical counseling, or abortion does not become more ethical when it becomes cruel. The backlash itself has now become part of the story, because it shows how quickly a deeply personal experience can turn into a public battleground. At the same time, the criticism of Jesse's language did not come only from people trying to attack him. Some of it came from people who felt his words reinforced painful stereotypes about Down syndrome. For parents, siblings, self-advocates, and disability organizations, words like burden or broad statements about whether a life is a blessing can carry a long history. They can affect how people imagine the lives of disabled people before they ever meet them. That is why Pickard's response was not simply emotional. It was also informational. She said families receiving a diagnosis should have facts, support, and space to process. That aligns with medical ethics discussions around prenatal diagnosis. The AMA Journal of Ethics has emphasized that families should receive accurate, objective, and unbiased information, and that counseling should avoid value judgments. It also notes that screening and diagnosis are not the same thing, and that identifying trisomy 21 does not predict the full future quality of life of the child or family. That point is especially important in a social media environment, where people often treat complex decisions as if they can be judged instantly. A prenatal diagnosis can involve medical uncertainty, family resources, emotional readiness, religious beliefs, personal values, and differing views on reproductive rights. None of those factors fit neatly into a comment box, and none of them justify stripping dignity from people with Down syndrome or from families making painful decisions. The clearest public record is this. Jesse and Ashley Ridgway said they ended a pregnancy after a fetal trisomy 21 diagnosis. Jesse's comments about Down syndrome drew backlash because many people believed the wording was harmful. He later defended the couple's decision and condemned the threats they said they received. Kandi Pickard, speaking as both the CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society and a parent, pushed back on the idea that Down syndrome is not a blessing, while also acknowledging that parents need accurate information and support. What remains unclear is how Jesse and Ashley will speak about this going forward. Jesse said he hoped sharing the story would help others feel less alone. But the public reaction has made clear that any future discussion will be closely watched. It is also unclear whether this moment will lead to a more careful conversation about prenatal counseling, disability representation, and the difference between describing medical risks and defining an entire life by them. The Startline takeaway is that this story should not be flattened into one side versus the other. There are several truths in the public record at the same time. Down syndrome can involve real health issues. Families receiving a diagnosis can feel fear, grief, confusion, or uncertainty. People with Down syndrome and their families also report joy, love, pride, and meaningful lives. Public figures have the right to share painful experiences, but words about disabled communities can carry impact far beyond the speaker's own family. And no disagreement justifies threats. For now, the most important update is Pickard's response. She is asking people to remember that accurate information matters, that families deserve support, and that people with Down syndrome should not be described only through fear. Jesse Ridgway's original announcement made the story public. The response from Kandi Pickard has now widened the story into a bigger question. When a private family decision becomes a public debate, can the conversation still leave room for facts, compassion, and the people living the reality every day?